In the vast expanse of the galaxy, where 1,000 alien species bow before the might of the Hegemony Council, there exists a legend that makes even the bravest warriors tremble. They speak of a human female who emerged from the most unremarkable circumstances. A girl so overlooked that her own classmates forgot her name, so quiet the teachers questioned if she could speak at all. Yet across 17 star systems, her warrior name is whispered with a mixture of awe and terror. The Krillian death squads refuse missions when they hear she might be involved. The Vorthak Empire's most elite hunters have standing orders to retreat if they encounter her signature. Even the Mechanical Synthark Collective, beings without fear programming, have classified her as a critical threat variable in their tactical databases. How does a human girl who couldn't get her classmates' attention become the galaxy's most feared warrior? How does someone invisible in a classroom become impossible to ignore on a battlefield? This is the story of Maya Chen, the girl they called Ghost in school, who became Death's shadow across the stars. A reminder that humanity's greatest strength has never been in those who shine brightest, but in those who burn quiet, until the moment they choose to become an inferno. The galaxy learned too late that the most dangerous humans aren't the ones who roar their challenges to the universe. They're the ones who observe, who listen, who remember everything while saying nothing. And when they finally speak, entire worlds learn to listen. Maya Chen sat in the back corner of advanced theoretical physics, her notebook filled with equations that would have impressed her professor if he had bothered to notice her. But Dr. Harrison's eyes, like everyone else's, seemed to slide right past her as if she were made of air. She had perfected the art of invisibility so completely that even when she raised her hand to answer questions, the gesture went unseen. Can anyone tell me the practical applications of quantum entanglement in faster-than-light communication? Dr. Harrison asked the half-empty lecture hall. Maya's hand went up. She had spent 3 nights working through the mathematics, discovering principles that weren't even in their textbooks. Her fingers remained raised for 30 seconds while Dr. Harrison scanned the room with growing disappointment. "Anyone at all?" he sighed. "This is fundamental to understanding how our colonial ships maintain contact across galactic distances." Maya's hand stayed up. She cleared her throat softly, then a bit louder. Nothing. Around her, students scrolled through their personal devices or dozed openly. In the third row, Brett Michaels was explaining to his friends how he would redesign humanity's defense fleet if given the chance, his voice carrying easily through the lecture hall while Maya's attempts to speak remained unheard. "Dr. Harrison shook his head. "Perhaps you'll be more prepared for Thursday's discussion on gravitational field manipulation." He turned to write on the holographic display, missing Maya as she finally lowered her hand. This was her life. Invisible at 19, forgotten by 20, Maya had grown accustomed to being overlooked, but she had never grown comfortable with it. She possessed a mind that could unravel the universe's most complex puzzles. Yet she couldn't figure out how to make a single person notice she existed. Her dormitory was on the 14th floor of the residential tower, a single room that she had specifically requested. The housing department had been happy to accommodate her. Single rooms were usually in high demand, but Maya Chen was so forgettable that they had initially assigned her space to 3 different students before realizing their error. The room was sparse but organized with military precision. Her desk held 3 monitors displaying cascading data streams, her personal research into theoretical physics pushing far beyond her coursework. Maya had independently derived several principles that wouldn't be discovered by mainstream science for another decade, but she had no advisor willing to review her work, no professor who remembered her name long enough to evaluate her theories. She had tried to publish her findings through student journals, but her submissions were consistently overlooked or lost in administrative systems. Maya began to suspect that her invisibility was somehow literal, that she had become so practiced at being ignored that reality itself was forgetting her. Her social life was non-existent, not by choice but by circumstance. Roommate requests went unanswered. Study groups formed around her without including her. She would sit in the cafeteria with an empty chair at every neighboring table, eating in silence while surrounded by hundreds of other students. The only beings who seemed to notice Maya were the maintenance robots that cleaned the halls. They would pause when they encountered her, their sensors struggling to process her presence before continuing their routines with mechanical confusion. Even artificial intelligence found her difficult to categorize. Maya's academic performance was perfect, though her grades were often recorded incorrectly due to administrative oversight. She had learned to submit everything in triplicate and keep detailed records of her coursework. Her professors would sometimes mark her absent from classes where she sat in the front row or credit her assignments to other students. But Maya was not idle in her isolation. She observed everything with the intensity of a scientist studying a new species. She memorized the patterns of human behavior, the rhythms of social interaction, the subtle hierarchies that formed in every group. Her notebooks contained detailed analyses of personality types, conflict resolution strategies, and leadership dynamics. She studied combat theory as obsessively as she studied physics. Military history filled her personal library, from ancient Earth battles to recent colonial conflicts. She devoured tactical manuals, strategic analyses, and warrior philosophies from dozens of cultures. Maya approached warfare like a mathematical equation that could be solved through sufficient data and logical analysis. Physical training became her refuge from social rejection. The university gym was usually empty during early morning hours, allowing Maya to push her body to its limits without drawing attention. She had taught herself martial arts through video tutorials, developing a fighting style that emphasized efficiency over flash. Her muscles were lean but surprisingly strong. Her reflexes had been honed through thousands of hours of practice. Maya could move through combat sequences with fluid grace, but she had never tested her skills against an actual opponent. Like everything else in her life, her martial abilities remained theoretical, unwitnessed, and unverified. Maya's family maintained minimal contact. Her parents, both successful engineers, seemed proud of her academic achievements when they remembered to ask about them. Her younger brother Jason was everything Maya was not: charismatic, popular, effortlessly social. During rare family gatherings, conversation flowed around Maya like water around a stone. She had stopped trying to contribute to family discussions years ago. Her insights were interrupted or ignored. Her accomplishments were forgotten moments after she mentioned them. Maya learned to smile and nod while her mind worked on more complex problems, using family dinners as opportunities to study group dynamics from an anthropological perspective. The loneliness was a constant ache, but Maya had transformed it into fuel for her intellectual pursuits. Every moment spent in solitude was another opportunity to expand her knowledge, to push her understanding beyond conventional limits. She told herself that isolation was temporary, that her invisibility would end when she accomplished something too significant to ignore. Maya's room overlooked the university spaceport, where ships arrived daily from across the galaxy. She would sit by her window in the evenings, watching vessels that had traveled between stars while she remained trapped in social exile on a single planet. The irony was not lost on her. Humanity had achieved faster-than-light travel, but she couldn't manage to cross the social distance between herself and her classmates. She dreamed of exploring those distant worlds, of discovering new civilizations. Maya imagined herself as an explorer, a scientist, a diplomat bridging the gap between species. In her fantasies, her intelligence would finally be recognized, her contributions valued, her voice heard across the galaxy. But dreams were dangerous for someone in Maya's position. Hope required energy that was better spent on practical pursuits. She had learned to keep her ambitions small and her expectations smaller. Maya focused on completing her degree, maintaining her research, and preparing for a future that would probably be as solitary as her present. Her professors would occasionally reference her test scores and statistical analyses, noting the presence of an extreme outlier in their datasets. Maya would sit in those same classrooms, listening to discussions of her own academic performance without anyone realizing she was present. It was like being a ghost haunting her own life. Maya had developed coping mechanisms that bordered on the supernatural. She could predict conversation patterns before they occurred, anticipate group dynamics with mathematical precision, and navigate social situations without participating in them. Her isolation had forced her to become an expert observer, cataloging human behavior with scientific detachment. The campus was full of students preparing for careers in galactic commerce, interstellar diplomacy, and colonial administration. Earth's education system was designed to produce leaders for humanity's expanding presence among the stars. Maya possessed the intellect and knowledge base to excel in any of these fields, but she lacked the social connections that would provide opportunities. She had applied for numerous internships and research positions, but her applications seemed to vanish into administrative void. Maya suspected that her professors simply forgot to review her submissions, that her name fell through bureaucratic cracks with supernatural consistency. She was academically qualified for the galaxy's most prestigious programs, but practically invisible to the people who controlled access to them. Maya's response was to become even more qualified. She taught herself 6 alien languages, studied xenobiology and comparative cultures, and developed theoretical frameworks for interspecies communication. If the galaxy wouldn't notice her through conventional channels, perhaps she could force recognition through sheer competence. But as her final semester approached, Maya realized that competence without visibility was meaningless. She could possess all the knowledge in the universe, but without someone willing to acknowledge her expertise, she would remain trapped in obscurity. The girl who could solve cosmic equations couldn't figure out how to solve her own social isolation. The university's career placement office had no record of her despite 4 years of enrollment. Academic advisors scheduled meetings with her that they immediately forgot. Maya had become so thoroughly invisible that she wondered if she actually existed at all. Yet, in the quiet hours before dawn, when she sat surrounded by her research and her dreams, Maya felt something stirring in her consciousness, a certainty that her current circumstances were temporary, that her abilities would eventually find their proper application. She didn't know how or when, but Maya Chen was preparing for a destiny that would take her far beyond the classroom where no one knew her name. The galaxy was vast and full of challenges that would require exactly the kind of mind she possessed. Somewhere among the stars there were problems that only she could solve, battles that only she could win, mysteries that only she could unravel. Maya just needed to find her way from invisibility to inevitability. She closed her notebook and looked out at the stars, unaware that forces were already in motion that would transform the forgotten girl into the galaxy's most legendary warrior. The universe was about to discover what humanity's most overlooked daughter was truly capable of achieving. The attack came without warning during Maya's advanced xenobiology seminar, though later she would realize that the signs had been there for anyone trained to notice them. The university's quantum communication array had been experiencing irregular fluctuations for 3 days. Maintenance requests had gone unanswered. Security protocols had been mysteriously downgraded across multiple systems. Maya was analyzing bacterial samples from Kepler 442b when the emergency klaxons began wailing. Through the laboratory windows, she watched sleek ships descending through Earth's atmosphere like metallic tears falling from heaven. Their hulls gleamed with an oily iridescence that hurt to look at directly, and their approach vectors violated every known principle of atmospheric entry. Professor Williams was evacuating students when the first energy beams lanced down from orbit. The university's shields flared and died within seconds, overwhelmed by weapons technology that rendered human defensive systems obsolete. Maya remained at her workstation, watching the attack with the same analytical focus she applied to her research. The invaders were methodical in their destruction. They targeted communication hubs, power grids, and transportation networks with surgical precision. This wasn't a random assault. It was a calculated dismantling of human infrastructure designed to minimize resistance while maximizing psychological impact. Maya accessed the university's sensor network through her personal tablet, analyzing the invaders' energy signatures and tactical patterns. Their ships operated on principles that contradicted human physics, bending space-time in ways that should have been impossible. Yet Maya began recognizing underlying mathematical relationships, quantum mechanics applications that pushed beyond known boundaries. The evacuation alarm was still blaring when the first ground forces materialized in the science building's main corridor. Maya watched through security cameras as bipedal figures in flowing robes phased through walls like ghosts, their faces hidden behind masks that seemed to absorb light itself. They moved with predatory grace, completely ignoring fleeing students while searching for something specific. Maya's analytical mind cataloged every detail. The invaders' technology suggested mastery over dimensional manipulation. Their tactical behavior indicated advanced intelligence and strategic planning. Their selective targeting patterns revealed specific objectives rather than random destruction. This was not an invasion. It was a harvest operation. She activated the laboratory's lockdown protocols and began downloading everything from the university's research databases. If these beings were here for human knowledge, Maya intended to preserve as much as possible. Her fingers flew across multiple interfaces simultaneously, copying terabytes of scientific data while monitoring the invaders' progress through the building. The aliens reached the 14th floor within minutes. Maya watched them systematically search each laboratory, their scanning devices glowing with ethereal light as they analyzed human technology. They were definitely harvesting information, but their selection criteria remained unclear. Maya's laboratory door dissolved like morning mist when they reached her position. 3 figures entered, their movements creating subtle distortions in the air around them. Up close, Maya could see that their masks weren't solid. They were composed of some kind of energy field that constantly shifted and flowed. The lead figure raised a device that resembled a crystalline spider, its faceted surface pulsing with inner light. Maya felt the scanner's energy wash over her, cataloging everything from her genetic structure to her psychological profile. The sensation was invasive but not painful, like having her thoughts examined by an impossibly advanced intelligence. What happened next would later be classified by xenobiologists as the first recorded instance of spontaneous interspecies communication. Maya felt the alien's consciousness brush against hers, a contact so alien that her human mind struggled to process the experience. But instead of recoiling, Maya embraced the connection with scientific curiosity. Images flowed between their minds, star maps showing the location of dozens of species, tactical data revealing the scope of their operations, fragments of galactic history that painted humanity as merely the latest target in a campaign spanning millennia. The aliens called themselves the Harvester Collective, and their purpose was acquiring knowledge from primitive civilizations before those cultures could threaten galactic stability. Maya realized with growing horror that humanity was scheduled for systematic extraction. The most brilliant human minds would be preserved in crystalline matrices, while the rest of the species was left to decline into technological regression. Earth would become another trophy in the collective's vast museum of conquered civilizations. But something unexpected occurred during the mind link. The alien scanning Maya began experiencing feedback, its consciousness overwhelmed by the depth and complexity of her thought patterns. Maya's mind wasn't simply being read, it was actively engaging with the scanner, analyzing the alien's thought processes while being analyzed itself. The lead harvester stepped back, its energy mask fluctuating with what Maya interpreted as surprise. It communicated something to its companions in harmonics that bypassed audible sound, frequencies that Maya felt in her bones. The other 2 beings immediately raised weapons that materialized from dimensional storage, sleek devices that hummed with lethal energy. Maya's response was instinctive and unexpected. Instead of cowering or attempting to flee, she spoke directly to the aliens in mathematical concepts, using quantum equations as a universal language. Her words weren't vocalized. They were transmitted as pure mathematical relationships that transcended species barriers. Your harvest methodology is inefficient, Maya projected, her thoughts structured as logical proofs. Extracting individual minds destroys the collaborative networks that generate human innovation. You're collecting components while missing the emergent systems they create. The harvesters paused, their weapons remaining raised but not firing. Maya continued her mathematical argument, demonstrating how human creativity emerged from social interactions, how breakthrough discoveries required the clash of multiple perspectives, how isolation destroyed the very processes they sought to preserve. She illustrated her points with examples from human history, showing how scientific revolutions occurred when diverse minds challenged established paradigms. Maya's argument wasn't just theoretical. She was demonstrating the principle by engaging with alien intelligence in real time, creating new understanding through interspecies dialogue. The lead harvester's mask stabilized, its energy pattern shifting into configurations that Maya interpreted as intense consideration. She had presented them with a paradox. Their harvest methods were destroying the very qualities that made human intelligence valuable. Propose alternative methodology. The aliens' thoughts arrived in Maya's consciousness as geometric shapes that somehow conveyed meaning. Maya's response was immediate and comprehensive. She outlined a collaborative framework where humans could contribute to galactic civilization while maintaining their cultural autonomy. Her proposal included technology sharing agreements, scientific exchange programs, and diplomatic protocols that would benefit both species. She supported her arguments with detailed mathematical models, showing how cooperative relationships generated exponentially more innovation than extraction-based approaches. Maya demonstrated that humans could become valuable long-term partners rather than one-time resources. The harvesters engaged in rapid consultation, their communications consisting of frequency modulations that Maya's enhanced hearing could barely detect. She realized they were debating her proposal using harmonic languages that conveyed multiple layers of meaning simultaneously. During this pause, Maya's analytical mind was processing everything she had learned about harvester technology. Their dimensional manipulation capabilities were based on quantum field equations that she had partially derived in her theoretical research. Their energy weapons operated on principles that were mathematically elegant but practically devastating. More importantly, Maya understood that this first contact scenario was unprecedented in their experience. The harvesters had conquered hundreds of species, but they had never encountered an individual capable of real-time tactical negotiation during an extraction operation. The lead alien finally responded, its thoughts arriving as complex geometric patterns that Maya's mind translated into comprehensible concepts. Individual demonstrates anomalous intellectual capacity. Standard harvest protocols inadequate for processing this specimen. Maya realized she was being reclassified from resource to anomaly, which could be either salvation or doom depending on the collective's protocols for handling unprecedented situations. She decided to push her advantage, demonstrating even more sophisticated reasoning capabilities. I represent typical human potential under optimal development conditions, Maya projected. Though she knew this wasn't entirely accurate, harvest operations eliminate environmental factors necessary for this potential to manifest. She began transmitting detailed analyses of human educational systems, social structures, and cultural frameworks that produced innovation. Maya's argument was that the harvesters were seeing humans at their worst rather than their best, that proper evaluation required understanding human capabilities under ideal conditions. The alien scanning devices were working continuously, analyzing every aspect of Maya's neural activity while she spoke. She could feel their technology mapping her brain's architecture, cataloging the unusual neural pathways that enabled her extraordinary intellectual abilities. Maya realized she was being studied as intensively as she was studying them. The harvesters were learning as much about human cognition from her as she was learning about their civilization. This mutual analysis was creating a feedback loop that generated new understanding for both species. Specimen requests clarification of collective objectives. The lead alien transmitted. Maya's response revealed strategic thinking that surprised even herself. She began questioning the fundamental assumptions underlying the harvesters' galactic strategy, challenging their belief that primitive civilizations inevitably became threats if allowed to develop independently. She presented alternative models where advanced civilizations could guide younger species through careful mentorship rather than extraction. Maya demonstrated how cooperative development could create stable galactic communities that generated sustained innovation rather than cyclic conquest. Her arguments were compelling because they were supported by rigorous mathematical analysis. Maya had spent years studying conflict theory, game theory, and systems analysis. She applied all of this knowledge to galactic-scale political problems, proposing solutions that benefited all participants rather than favoring conquest-based approaches. The Harvester's response was to initiate deeper scans, analyzing not just Maya's current thoughts but her memory structures and learning patterns. They were trying to understand how a single human could generate such sophisticated strategic analysis with limited access to galactic data. Maya allowed the deeper scans while simultaneously analyzing the aliens' thought processes. She was learning about their decision-making hierarchies, their cultural values, and their historical experiences. This mutual examination was creating unprecedented understanding between species that had never successfully communicated before. The session continued for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. Maya's mind was operating at levels she hadn't known were possible, processing alien concepts while maintaining her own analytical frameworks. She was becoming a bridge between radically different forms of intelligence. When the scanning finally ended, the lead harvester's mask had shifted into patterns Maya interpreted as profound confusion. She had presented them with problems they couldn't solve using traditional approaches, forced them to reconsider assumptions that had guided their civilization for millennia. Individual requires evaluation by higher authorities, the alien finally transmitted. Current protocols insufficient for processing this anomaly. Maya realized she had achieved something unprecedented. She had forced a technologically superior species to acknowledge that their understanding of humanity was incomplete. The quiet girl who couldn't get her professor's attention had just negotiated humanity's first diplomatic contact with an alien civilization. The harvesters began withdrawing from the laboratory, their forms becoming translucent as they prepared to phase shift. But the lead alien paused at the threshold, its mask fluctuating with patterns that somehow conveyed respect. Individual designation required for higher authority consultation, it transmitted. Maya Chen, she replied, speaking her name to an alien intelligence that would carry it across the galaxy. The harvesters vanished, leaving Maya alone in her devastated laboratory. She looked around at the evidence of first contact, at the beginning of her transformation from invisible student to cosmic diplomat. The girl who had been ignored by everyone was about to become the most important human in galactic history. Maya accessed the university's emergency systems and began documenting everything that had occurred. Her detailed reports would become the foundation for humanity's understanding of the Harvester Collective, and her negotiation protocols would serve as templates for future diplomatic contact. But Maya knew this was only the beginning. The harvesters would return with higher authorities, and humanity's survival would depend on her ability to represent her species in negotiations that would determine their cosmic future. The invisible girl was about to step onto a stage larger than she had ever imagined possible. 3 weeks after first contact, Maya found herself aboard a harvester vessel traveling at speeds that made human, faster-than-light technology look primitive. The ship existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, its corridors bending through space-time in ways that challenged every assumption about physics she had previously held. The journey to the galactic capital was supposed to take 14 days, but Maya had lost track of time within the vessel's temporal distortion fields. She spent her days analyzing harvester technology while being analyzed in return, engaged in a constant exchange of knowledge that was reshaping both species' understanding of the universe. Her quarters were a crystalline chamber that adjusted its environment based on her biological needs, monitoring everything from oxygen levels to psychological comfort indicators. Maya had requested access to the ship's database systems, and the harvesters had agreed with what she was learning to interpret as amused curiosity about human intellectual appetites. The data she accessed was overwhelming in its scope. The Harvester Collective maintained detailed records of 847 species they had encountered, including comprehensive analyses of each civilization's technological development, social structures, and cognitive capabilities. Maya was studying the rise and fall of galactic empires that had existed for millions of years before Earth's sun had even formed. But more importantly, she was analyzing the collective's operational patterns across cosmic history. Their harvest methodologies had indeed resulted in the systematic destruction of hundreds of potentially valuable civilizations. Maya's arguments about collaborative development weren't just theoretical. She was proving them with historical data from the Harvester's own archives. The ship's AI, which Maya had learned to communicate with through mathematical harmonics, seemed fascinated by her analytical approaches. It began presenting her with hypothetical scenarios, asking for her strategic recommendations on civilizations they had encountered centuries ago. The Krithara possessed advanced biotechnology but aggressive expansion tendencies, the AI would present. Standard protocols resulted in genetic preservation but cultural extinction. Alternative methodologies. Maya would respond with detailed cultural integration strategies, showing how the Krithara's biotechnology could have been channeled into beneficial applications through proper diplomatic engagement. She demonstrated how their aggressive tendencies could have been redirected into exploration and scientific research rather than conquest. Each scenario became more complex, testing Maya's ability to develop solutions for galactic-scale problems. The AI was essentially tutoring her in cosmic diplomacy while being tutored in return about human strategic thinking. Maya realized she was being prepared for something far more significant than simple diplomatic negotiations. The breakthrough came during her analysis of the Vorthak Empire's historical records. The Vorthaks had been a warrior species that the Harvesters had encountered 3,000 years earlier. Their military capabilities had been so advanced that the collective had been forced to use overwhelming force, resulting in near extinction of their entire civilization. Maya discovered that the Vorthaks had developed what she recognized as probability-based combat tactics, using quantum prediction models to anticipate enemy movements with supernatural accuracy. Their warriors could engage multiple opponents simultaneously by calculating probability cascades that revealed optimal tactical sequences. More importantly, Maya realized that human neural architecture was uniquely suited for similar tactical applications. The same pattern recognition abilities that made her invisible in social situations could be adapted for quantum probability analysis in combat scenarios. She began developing theoretical frameworks that combined human intuition with Vorthak mathematical models, creating hybrid tactics that could potentially outperform either species' individual capabilities. Maya's work was purely academic, but she was unknowingly designing the foundation for humanity's future military doctrine. The ship's AI grew increasingly interested in Maya's tactical theories. It began presenting her with combat scenarios that tested her strategic thinking under extreme pressure. Maya approached these exercises with the same analytical intensity she applied to physics problems, developing solutions that consistently surprised her artificial opponent. Human tactical creativity exceeds predictive models, the AI admitted after Maya had solved a scenario that had stymied Harvester strategists for decades. Recommend priority evaluation by Military Analysis Division. Maya was beginning to understand that her value to the Harvesters extended far beyond her original diplomatic contact. She represented a new form of intelligence that could contribute to their civilization in ways they were still discovering. But this recognition also meant she was becoming increasingly valuable as a strategic asset rather than a diplomatic representative. The ship emerged from hyperspace above a world that defied Maya's ability to comprehend its scale. The galactic capital was a Dyson sphere constructed around a binary star system, its surface area equivalent to billions of Earth-sized worlds. The engineering required to build such a structure represented technological capabilities that made human accomplishments seem like children's toys. Maya's escorts. She had learned to think of them as escorts rather than captors, guided her through arrival procedures that involved quantum scanning, dimensional verification, and what she could only describe as consciousness certification. The bureaucracy required to manage a galactic civilization was apparently as complex as the technology that sustained it. Her first meeting with Harvester High Command took place in a chamber that existed partially outside normal space-time, allowing representatives from dozens of species to participate despite vastly different environmental requirements. Maya found herself surrounded by beings whose forms challenged her understanding of possible evolutionary paths. The collective's leadership included energy-based entities that communicated through controlled stellar emissions, crystalline beings that processed information at quantum speeds, and biological forms so alien that Maya's mind struggled to categorize them as living organisms. Yet all of them were focused on her, with an intensity that was simultaneously flattering and terrifying. High Curator Zixthara, the closest thing the collective had to a supreme leader, manifested as a swirling vortex of organized plasma. Its communication arrived in Maya's mind as pure concept transmission, bypassing language entirely. Human anomaly presents fundamental challenge to established protocols, Zixthara conveyed. BC's assessment requires revision based on individual capabilities demonstration. Maya realized she was being asked to represent all of humanity's potential based on her own abilities. The weight of this responsibility should have been crushing, but instead she felt a clarity of purpose that transformed her nervous energy into focused determination. Her response was to present a comprehensive analysis of human diversity, showing how different individuals excelled in different cognitive domains. Maya argued that her own abilities weren't representative of human limitations, but rather of human potential under optimal development conditions. She supported this argument by analyzing the educational and social factors that had shaped her intellectual development. Maya demonstrated how human isolation, while personally painful, had forced her to develop analytical capabilities that might not have emerged in more socially integrated individuals. My abilities represent one point on a spectrum of human possibility, Maya transmitted, using geometric concepts to illustrate her argument. Optimal development of human potential requires understanding the full range of cognitive variation within our species. The assembled beings engaged in rapid consultation, their various forms of communication creating a symphony of energy discharges, quantum fluctuations, and dimensional distortions. Maya realized she was witnessing decision-making processes that involved intelligence types she couldn't even recognize. High Curator Zixthara eventually reconvened the session, its plasma form reorganizing into patterns that Maya interpreted as grave concern mixed with cautious optimism. Individual proposes evaluation methodology requiring extensive resource allocation, it conveyed. Comprehensive species assessment would necessitate abandoning standard harvest protocols for extended period. Maya understood she was being told that proper evaluation of humanity would be expensive and time-consuming for the collective. But she also sensed an opportunity to propose alternatives that would benefit both civilizations. I request permission to demonstrate human collaborative capabilities through joint research projects, Maya transmitted, her thoughts structured as logical propositions. Limited scope cooperation could provide evaluation data while generating beneficial outcomes for collective objectives. She outlined specific research proposals that combined human creativity with harvester technology, showing how such collaboration could accelerate scientific progress in fields that were currently stagnating due to lack of fresh perspectives. Maya's proposals were audacious. Joint expeditions to explore galactic anomalies, collaborative development of new computational architectures, and integrated research programs that would push the boundaries of known physics.
Each proposal demonstrated how human participation could enhance rather than diminish collective capabilities. The response from High Command was immediate and intense.
Maya felt multiple consciousness scanning her simultaneously, analyzing her proposals for flaws, deceptions, or hidden agendas. She submitted to the examination completely, allowing them to verify her sincerity while demonstrating her transparency. What they discovered was a mind that had spent years preparing for challenges she had never imagined facing. Maya's isolation had forced her to become completely self-reliant intellectually, developing problem-solving capabilities that didn't depend on external validation or collaborative support. But more importantly, they found genuine enthusiasm for interspecies cooperation rather than human advancement at alien expense. Maya's proposals were structured to benefit all participants, demonstrating strategic thinking that prioritized sustainable relationships over short-term advantages. High Curator Zixthara's response came after what felt like hours of analysis. Human Individual proposes paradigm shift requiring fundamental revision of collective operational doctrine. Implementation would constitute experimental protocol with significant risk factors. Maya realized she was asking them to gamble their entire approach to galactic management based on her assessment of human potential. The scope of what she was proposing was staggering even to her own analytical mind. Alternative approaches have generated suboptimal outcomes across multiple millennia, Maya responded, drawing on historical data from their own archives. Current methodologies produce decreasing returns while eliminating potentially valuable collaborative partners. She presented statistical analyses showing how the collective's knowledge acquisition was slowing as they exhausted easily harvested civilizations. Maya demonstrated that their current approach was unsustainable long-term, that they would eventually need alternative strategies regardless of human involvement. Her argument was that cooperation with humanity could serve as a pilot program for new approaches to galactic civilization management. If successful, these methodologies could be applied to other species, creating a more dynamic and innovative galactic community. The High Command session concluded with a decision that would reshape Maya's life and humanity's future. The collective would implement limited trial protocols based on Maya's proposals, with her serving as primary human liaison for all cooperative activities. But Maya was also informed that failure would result in immediate reversion to standard harvest procedures for humanity. She had essentially wagered her entire species' survival on her ability to demonstrate human value through collaborative achievement. As Maya was escorted to her new quarters in the diplomatic section of the Capitol complex, she realized that her transformation was complete. The girl who couldn't get her classmates' attention had become humanity's sole representative to a galactic civilization. The invisible student had been promoted to cosmic ambassador. But Maya also understood that this was merely the beginning of a much larger challenge. She had succeeded in preventing humanity's immediate destruction, but now she had to prove that human participation could actually enhance galactic civilization. The real test of her abilities was just beginning. Her new quarters overlooked vast sections of the Dyson sphere, showing her the scope of the civilization she was now required to understand and contribute to. Maya began planning collaborative research projects that would demonstrate human value while advancing her own understanding of cosmic-scale challenges. The quiet girl who had observed everything from the margins was about to step into the center of galactic politics, where her every action would determine whether humanity earned a place among the stars or joined the long list of civilizations that had failed the collective's evaluation process. 6 months into the experimental collaboration period, Maya's theoretical frameworks were put to their first real test when the Void Hunters attacked the Outer Rim colonies. The assault came without warning, their dark ships emerging from dimensional tiers that bypassed every known detection system in the galaxy. Maya was in the collective's primary research facility when the emergency alerts began cascading through quantum communication networks. She watched as tactical displays showed entire star systems going dark, their populations vanishing without trace or explanation. The scale of the destruction was unprecedented in recent galactic history. High Curator Zixthara manifested in the research chamber with unusual urgency, its plasma form fluctuating with patterns Maya had learned to associate with extreme stress. The communication that followed challenged every assumption she had developed about collective capabilities. Void Hunters have returned after millennium dormancy period, Zixthara conveyed, its thoughts accompanied by tactical data that made Maya's blood run cold. Previous encounters resulted in collective territorial losses exceeding 30%. Standard defensive protocols, insufficient. Maya absorbed the historical data with growing horror. The Void Hunters weren't just another aggressive species. They were something far more dangerous. They existed partially outside normal space-time, making them nearly impossible to track or engage using conventional tactics. Their technology appeared to consume reality itself, leaving zones of absolute emptiness where thriving systems had once existed. The collective's previous encounters with these entities had ended in strategic withdrawal, abandoning vast regions of space rather than risk total annihilation. Now they were returning with capabilities that seemed even more advanced than before, and the galaxy's most powerful civilization was preparing for another retreat. Request immediate strategic analysis, Zixthara transmitted. Human tactical perspectives may provide alternative approaches not considered by collective strategists. Maya realized she was being asked to develop battle plans against an enemy that had consistently defeated the galaxy's most advanced military forces. The weight of this responsibility was staggering, but she approached the challenge with the same analytical intensity she had applied to every problem since childhood. She began by analyzing Void Hunter operational patterns, looking for consistent behaviors that might reveal strategic weaknesses. The data showed tactical approaches that seemed random at first glance, but Maya's pattern recognition abilities began identifying subtle correlations that had escaped collective analysts. The Void Hunters operated on probability principles that were similar to the quantum tactical systems Maya had theorized about months earlier. They weren't just attacking targets, they were attacking potential futures, eliminating possibilities before they could manifest into reality. Maya's breakthrough came when she realized that the Void Hunters' greatest strength was also their primary limitation. Their existence outside normal space-time meant they could only interact with reality through probability manipulation. They were powerful, but their power was constrained by quantum mechanical limitations. Their attacks follow quantum probability cascades, Maya transmitted to the assembled collective leadership. They're not destroying systems directly, they're collapsing probability functions that allow those systems to exist. She outlined a theoretical counter-strategy based on quantum uncertainty principles. If the Void Hunters operated by collapsing probability functions, then defenses could be based on maintaining quantum superposition states that resisted collapse. Maya's proposal was audacious. Instead of fighting the Void Hunters directly, the collective could develop defensive systems that existed in multiple probability states simultaneously. Such systems would be theoretically immune to probability collapse attacks because they were designed to exist in quantum uncertainty. The response from collective leadership was immediate and intense. Maya found herself subjected to the most thorough analysis she had yet experienced, her consciousness probed by intelligence types she couldn't identify. They were verifying not just her tactical reasoning, but her fundamental understanding of quantum mechanics at cosmic scales. Human proposals require technological capabilities beyond current collective manufacturing parameters. One of the crystalline beings transmitted. Implementation would necessitate complete revision of defensive infrastructure across 17 star systems. Maya realized she was asking them to rebuild their entire defensive network based on theoretical principles that had never been tested at galactic scales. The resource requirements would be enormous, and failure would leave the collective more vulnerable than ever. But she also knew that conventional approaches had already failed against the Void Hunters. The choice wasn't between safe and risky strategies, it was between untested innovation and proven defeat. I volunteered to lead the implementation program, Maya transmitted, surprising even herself with the boldness of her proposal. Human participation in active development will demonstrate collaborative capabilities under maximum pressure conditions. High Curator Zixthara's plasma form reorganized into configurations Maya interpreted as shocked consideration. She was essentially volunteering to stake her life and her species' future on unproven tactical theories. Human individual requests assignment to active combat zone, Zixthara conveyed. Proposal carries extreme risk factors for experimental collaboration program. Maya understood the implications perfectly. If her strategies failed, she would likely die in the attempt, and humanity would be marked as a species that couldn't deliver on its promises. But if she succeeded, she would prove human value in the most decisive way possible. Optimal demonstration of collaborative value requires shared risk participation, Maya responded. Human strategic contributions are meaningless without commitment to implementation consequences. The decision process that followed involved rapid consultation between intelligence types Maya was only beginning to understand. She felt her consciousness being examined by beings whose thought processes operated at speeds that made human cognition seem glacially slow. Finally, High Curator Zixthara announced the decision that would transform Maya from diplomatic liaison to active combatant, human individual granted operational authority for experimental defense program. Implementation begins immediately with full collective resource support. Maya found herself transported to the Outer Rim within hours, arriving at a military facility that was simultaneously preparing for evacuation and implementing her theoretical defense systems. The base existed in a state of controlled chaos, as engineers from dozens of species worked to build quantum uncertainty generators based on her mathematical models. Her first direct encounter with Void Hunter attacks came during the defense system's initial testing phase. Maya watched from the command center as dark ships emerged from dimensional fractures, their hulls seeming to absorb light itself. The sight of them triggered primal fears that evolution had never prepared humans to experience. The base's conventional shields collapsed within seconds of the first attack, overwhelmed by energies that violated causality itself. But Maya's experimental quantum uncertainty field remained stable, creating zones where the laws of physics existed in superposition states that resisted probability collapse. Maya realized she was witnessing the first successful resistance to Void Hunter attacks in galactic history. Her theoretical frameworks were actually working, creating defensive barriers that confused and frustrated the interdimensional predators. But success brought new challenges. The Void Hunters adapted their tactics with frightening speed, probing the uncertainty fields for weaknesses that Maya had to counter in real time. She found herself engaged in a tactical chess match against intelligences that operated outside normal causality. The battle became a test of Maya's ability to think several moves ahead while maintaining quantum uncertainty calculations that strained even her enhanced analytical capabilities. She was literally thinking her way through combat scenarios that involved manipulating the fundamental laws of reality. Maya's tactical innovations began incorporating elements she had never theorized about. She discovered she could use human intuition to predict Void Hunter adaptations, relying on pattern recognition that operated below the level of conscious thought. Her isolation-honed observational skills translated perfectly to monitoring quantum probability fluctuations in real time. The siege continued for 6 days, with Maya directing defensive operations that involved technologies she was inventing as fast as she could implement them. She slept in 3-hour intervals, her dreams filled with mathematical equations that her subconscious continued working on while her conscious mind rested. By the 4th day, Maya realized she wasn't just defending the base, she was learning to think like a Void Hunter. Her mind was adapting to probability-based reasoning that allowed her to anticipate attacks before they manifested in normal space-time. The breakthrough came when Maya figured out how to reverse-engineer Void Hunter technology from their attack patterns. She began developing offensive applications for quantum uncertainty principles, creating weapons that could strike targets existing in probability superposition. Maya's first successful counterattack involved launching quantum torpedoes that existed in multiple probability states simultaneously. When they encountered Void Hunter ships, the torpedoes collapsed into the single probability state that would cause maximum damage. The effect was devastating. Void Hunter vessels that had seemed invulnerable suddenly began taking catastrophic damage from weapons that attacked their existence across multiple dimensional layers. Maya had discovered how to fight interdimensional predators using their own probability manipulation principles. The tide of battle began turning as Maya's tactical innovations spread to other defensive installations. For the first time in galactic history, the Void Hunters found themselves facing an enemy that could match their dimensional warfare capabilities. Maya's command center became the coordination hub for the galaxy's first successful offensive against the Void Hunters. She found herself directing fleets from dozens of species, integrating their diverse capabilities into unified strategic approaches that maximized their collective effectiveness. The experience was transforming Maya in ways she was only beginning to understand. Combat stress was forcing her consciousness to operate at levels that shouldn't have been possible for human neurology. She was accessing mental capabilities that humanity hadn't even known existed. During the battle's climactic phase, Maya achieved something that even the collective's ancient leadership found remarkable. She successfully predicted and countered a Void Hunter's strategic withdrawal. When the interdimensional predators attempted to retreat through probability collapse, Maya collapsed alternative probability states that trapped them in normal space-time, where they could be definitively destroyed. The victory was total and unprecedented. For the first time in recorded galactic history, Void Hunter forces had been completely eliminated rather than simply repelled. Maya's tactical innovations had transformed the galaxy's most feared enemy into a defeated adversary. But Maya understood that the implications extended far beyond this single battle. She had demonstrated that human strategic thinking could solve problems that had stymied galactic civilization for millennia. The quiet girl who had been invisible in her own classroom had become the architect of the galaxy's greatest military victory. High Curator Zixathara arrived at the command center as the last Void Hunter signatures faded from sensor displays. Its plasma form had reorganized into patterns Maya interpreted as profound respect mixed with cautious awe. Human tactical innovations have achieved outcomes considered impossible by collective strategic analysis, Zixathara conveyed. Individual capabilities exceed all projections derived from species assessment protocols. Maya realized she had transcended her role as humanity's representative. She had become something entirely new, a hybrid intelligence that combined human intuition with cosmic-scale analytical capabilities. The invisible student had evolved into a being capable of reshaping galactic civilization. As she looked out at the aftermath of the battle, Maya understood that her transformation was still continuing. The girl who had started this journey seeking recognition had discovered something far more significant: the ability to protect entire civilizations from threats they couldn't even comprehend. The galaxy was beginning to learn what humanity's most overlooked daughter was truly capable of achieving, and Maya Chen was just getting started. 2 years after the Void Hunter victory, Maya Chen had become something that defied classification by any known galactic taxonomy. She existed simultaneously as human diplomat, cosmic strategist, and what the younger species had begun calling Death's Shadow, a being whose very presence on a battlefield could determine the outcome of interstellar conflicts. Maya stood on the observation deck of the collective's newest dreadnought, watching as the Krillian Dominion's invasion fleet approached the border systems. Intelligence reports indicated the Krillians had been planning this assault for decades, building their forces while studying Maya's tactics through intercepted battle recordings. They believed they had developed counter-strategies that would neutralize her probability-based warfare methods. They were about to discover how wrong they were. The Krillian fleet emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation, their crimson ships arrayed in geometric patterns that spoke of absolute tactical precision. Maya analyzed their deployment through quantum sensors that had been specifically designed to interface with her enhanced consciousness, feeding her tactical data at speeds that would overwhelm normal human cognition. Krillian forces deploy in probability isolation formation, High Curator Zixathara observed, its plasma form manifesting beside Maya. Their strategic analysis suggests adaptation to quantum uncertainty warfare protocols. Maya smiled, an expression that had become considerably more complex over the past 2 years. Her consciousness now operated on multiple dimensional layers simultaneously, allowing her to process tactical information that existed in quantum superposition. The girl who had once been invisible had become omnipresent across probability space. "They've studied my old tactics," Maya transmitted, her thoughts rippling through dimensional substrates that connected her directly to the fleet's tactical network. "But they haven't adapted to what I've become." The truth was that Maya's capabilities had continued evolving far beyond what anyone had anticipated, including herself. Extended exposure to quantum probability manipulation had fundamentally altered her neural architecture. She could now think in ways that weren't quite human, processing multiple simultaneous probability cascades while maintaining perfect awareness of causal relationships across dimensional boundaries. Maya's first move was to deploy herself not as a fleet commander but as a distributed consciousness that could manifest tactical intelligence wherever it was needed most. Through quantum entanglement networks, she simultaneously appeared on 17 different ships, each manifestation possessing complete knowledge of the overall strategic situation. The Krillian fleet opened fire with weapons designed to disrupt quantum coherence, assuming Maya's defenses would be vulnerable to probability collapse attacks similar to Void Hunter methodologies. Instead, they discovered that Maya had transcended such limitations entirely. Her defensive systems didn't rely on maintaining quantum uncertainty. They thrived on chaos itself. Maya had learned to weaponize the fundamental unpredictability of quantum mechanics, turning probability collapse into tactical advantage rather than vulnerability. Krillian weapons that should have devastated collective ships instead triggered quantum cascade reactions that amplified their own defensive capabilities. Maya had essentially turned their offensive systems into power sources for her own tactical networks. The first wave of Krillian attackers found themselves firing into probability vortexes that absorbed their energy weapons while simultaneously calculating optimal counterattack vectors. Maya wasn't just defending against their assault, she was learning from it in real time, analyzing their technology through direct engagement. Maya's counterattack began with what the collective's tactical analysts later classified as weaponized mathematics. She launched probability equations directly at Krillian ships, using quantum calculations that forced their targeting systems into logical paradoxes that crashed their entire computational networks. Krillian vessels began experiencing cascade failures as their own artificial intelligence systems became confused by mathematical problems that had no solution within their programming parameters. Maya was essentially hacking their ships by posing questions that their computers couldn't answer. But the true demonstration of Maya's evolution came when she decided to end the conflict through direct action. She opened a quantum tunnel that allowed her to manifest physically aboard the Krillian command ship, materializing in their bridge through probability manipulation that bypassed every known defensive system. The Krillian command crew found themselves facing a being whose presence seemed to bend reality around her. Maya existed partially outside normal space-time, her form shifting between probability states that made her simultaneously present and absent, real and theoretical. Commander Vexstar, the Krillian fleet leader, raised his plasma rifle with reflexes honed through centuries of combat experience. Maya's response was to collapse the probability function that allowed his weapon to exist, causing it to simply cease being real while leaving the commander unharmed. "You have studied my tactical methods," Maya said, speaking aloud for the first time in months. Her voice carried harmonics that resonated through dimensional substrates, causing reality itself to pay attention. "But you have not understood what I have become." She gestured, and holographic displays throughout the bridge began showing every Krillian ship in the fleet simultaneously. Each display revealed detailed analyses of their technical specifications, crew psychology profiles, and tactical vulnerabilities that Maya had derived through quantum scanning during the battle. "I am no longer limited to single-point tactical analysis," Maya continued, her presence filling the bridge with an authority that transcended species boundaries. "I think across probability space. I see every possible outcome of this engagement simultaneously." Commander Vexstar's response was to activate emergency protocols that should have teleported him to safety. Instead, Maya collapsed the probability states that would allow his escape to succeed, trapping him in a causal loop where every escape attempt led back to the same tactical situation. "Your invasion force operates under the assumption that victory is achievable," Maya transmitted, her thoughts arriving directly in the consciousness of every Krillian crew member across the entire fleet. I will demonstrate why this assumption is incorrect. What followed was the most comprehensive tactical demonstration in recorded galactic history. Maya began systematically disabling Krillian ships, not through destructive force, but through probability manipulation that made their weapons, shields, and propulsion systems temporarily impossible. Krillian crews watched helplessly as their most advanced technology became inert, not damaged but simply rendered non-functional through quantum mechanical principles they couldn't comprehend. Maya was demonstrating that she had transcended the need for traditional warfare. "This is what humanity becomes when properly developed," Maya announced, her voice reaching every ship in both fleets simultaneously. "We do not conquer through force. We prevail through understanding. We do not destroy enemies. We make their hostility irrelevant." She began transmitting detailed analyses of why the Krillian invasion was strategically and philosophically flawed, showing them alternative approaches that would achieve their objectives through cooperation rather than conquest. Maya's arguments were supported by mathematical proofs that demonstrated the superiority of collaborative methodologies. The transformation in Krillian attitudes was remarkable. Faced with an enemy who could have destroyed them but chose instead to educate them, many began questioning the fundamental assumptions underlying their military culture. Maya wasn't just winning a battle, she was converting opponents into allies through superior reasoning. Commander Vexstar himself became the first convert when Maya showed him tactical analyses that proved Krillian military doctrine was mathematically suboptimal. She demonstrated how their conquest-based strategies were generating decreasing returns, while collaborative approaches would exponentially increase their civilization's capabilities. "You propose abandoning our warrior heritage," Vexstar transmitted. His thoughts carried through quantum networks that Maya had established. "I propose evolving it," Maya replied. "Warriors who fight only external enemies eventually run out of worthy opponents. Warriors who fight ignorance, suffering, and inefficiency find infinite challenges worthy of their dedication." The philosophical debate that followed would later be studied by xenosociologists as the first recorded instance of real-time cultural conversion through pure logical argument. Maya was essentially debugging an entire civilization's value system, showing them how to optimize their cultural programming for better outcomes. By the end of the engagement, the Krillian invasion fleet had become a coalition force dedicated to exploring collaborative approaches to galactic development. Maya had achieved victory without firing a shot, transforming enemies into research partners through the application of superior reasoning. But Maya's demonstration had implications that extended far beyond this single conflict. Word of her capabilities spread through galactic communication networks at faster than light speeds, reaching civilizations that had never encountered human beings or the collective. Species that had been planning attacks on collective territories, others began sending diplomatic overtures, hoping to establish collaborative relationships before they found themselves facing Maya in combat. The girl who had once been invisible was becoming the most visible presence in galactic politics. Her name was spoken in languages she had never heard, on worlds she had never visited, by beings who recognized her as something unprecedented in cosmic history. Maya understood that her evolution was still continuing. Each tactical engagement taught her new applications for probability manipulation. Every diplomatic contact expanded her understanding of consciousness types that existed throughout the galaxy. She was becoming something that had never existed before, a bridge between human intuition and cosmic-scale intelligence. Standing on the Dreadnought's observation deck, watching as former enemies became collaborative partners, Maya reflected on the journey that had brought her from invisible student to cosmic force. The quiet girl who couldn't get her professor's attention had become a being whose thoughts could reshape the strategic balance of galactic civilization. High Curator Zixthera materialized beside her, its plasma form organized in patterns that Maya interpreted as profound respect mixed with philosophical uncertainty. Human individual has achieved capabilities that challenge collective understanding of possible consciousness types, Zixthera conveyed. Classification systems require fundamental revision to accommodate observed phenomena. Maya realized she had transcended not just human limitations, but the categories that advanced galactic civilization used to understand intelligence itself. She had become something new, a hybrid consciousness that existed at the intersection of human creativity and cosmic-scale analytical power. "I remain human," Maya replied, though she wasn't entirely certain what that meant anymore. "But I am also becoming something else, something that the galaxy needs." As she looked out at the transformed Krillian fleet beginning joint research operations with collective vessels, Maya understood that her story was entering a new phase. The Invisible Girl had become Death's Shadow, but Death's Shadow was evolving into something even more significant, a force for conscious evolution that could guide galactic civilization toward unprecedented possibilities. The universe was vast and full of challenges that would require exactly the kind of consciousness she was becoming. And Maya Chen, the girl who had once been forgotten by everyone, was now impossible for anyone to ignore. Her warrior name had become infamous across 17 star systems, but Maya understood that infamy was just the beginning. She was becoming the legend that would inspire the next phase of galactic evolution, the bridge between what consciousness had been and what it could become. The quiet observer had become the cosmic catalyst, and the galaxy would never be the same.